Hello everybody, and as requested, here is a reading of the Book of Goblins, the book that can be found in Tell Me Why, a collection of short fairy tale-like stories written by the twins that are the main characters in the game. There are 19 of these short stories, and I'm going to read them in sets of 5, so this is one of 4 videos. Hope you enjoy. Nice little bit of light reading to hopefully relax you, whatever you decide to do when listening to this. The first story is The Frog Earns the Right to Speak. Once upon a time, in an ancient and deep forest, there lived a big frog in a small pond. She was a peaceful creature who spent most of her time eating, swimming and sleeping. From the morning to the evening, she did everything the smaller frogs did, except she did it bigger. She ate more, she jumped farther, she was smarter, and she made much more noise. Everybody in the forest could hear her loud croaking, and everybody was happy that they could. You see, it was easy to get lost in the forest, but thanks to the frog's loud noises, you could just as easily find your way back to her pond. Maybe it would not have been the same if the big frog had kept singing during the night, but she was much too lazy an animal to stay active after dark. One day, an unknown visitor came to the forest for the first time. It was a young woman dressed in a beautiful gown. She was walking fast through the woods as if she was running away, and she never looked back. Many eyes spied the princess pass by, but no one dared to help her, for the mad hunter was on her trail. "This is not our business," they said, "and we had better look away, for the mad hunter was an unyielding man who loved nothing but hunting down prey for money and glory. Nothing could escape his piercing eye for long." So the princess walked alone, without help, until she was hopelessly lost in the big forest. Exhausted, she pressed on with no idea of where she was heading as the hunter drew ever closer, dogged in his pursuit. She continued this way until she heard a heavy croaking, far off to her left, so clear and loud that the princess immediately made for the source of the noise. A few minutes later, she reached the big frog in the small pond, and the frog looked at her with a gentle smile. "Help me, please," said the princess. "I need a place to rest and to hide." "Ribbit," answered the frog, and the princess frowned. "Please, stop making noise. The mad hunter is after me." "Ribbit," said the frog again, so loud that the princess had to cover her ears. The creature began to jump every which way. "What are you doing?" asked the princess. "Stop all that noise, or he will find us." But the frog kept croaking and jumping around her, left and right, up and down. "Ribbit, ribbit," until the princess understood the meaning of all this fuss. Cautiously, the woman climbed on the back of the big animal, and then, with a leap, the frog set off away from the pond. The frog jumped so high and so far that even the hunter could not find where the princess had gone. With a few jumps, the princess was out of his piercing eye. A few jumps more, and she had vanished for good. The princess closed her eyes and let her clever mount carry her wherever the creature pleased. Less than an hour later, the big frog had reached the other side of the ancient forest, near the shores of the very deep lake. There she landed without a noise in front of a big wooden house that had been abandoned. "Thank you," said the princess, covering the animal's snout with kisses. "I only wish you could speak, so I would have understood what you were trying to do sooner." As she pronounced these words, something incredible happened. The big frog was suddenly able to speak. Her first words startled the princess. "The mad hunter is always at my heels. Now you're safe, and I've had my revenge. You can stay in this house. It has been abandoned for a long time, and no one will look for you here." And then, without looking back, the big frog jumped back to the pond. And this is how the big frog saved the princess, and how she earned the right to speak. The Bear and the Princess. Once upon a time, in the ancient and deep forest, the old bear stood on the bank of the river, swiping at salmon on their way to the spawning grounds. Just as he got his paw on a particularly fat one, he heard a woman shouting for help. He considered simply eating his salmon, but then she screamed again, and he lumbered over to investigate. After a short walk, he found the princess clinging to the top of the tree while a wolf snarled and snapped at the base of the tree. Old Bear would normally not get in the middle of such a situation. After all, as a fellow predator, he understood the wolf's need to hunt. But when he saw the princess, he was struck by her beauty, and he knew he had to help. With a great roar, the bear heaved onto his hind legs, rising to his full height. The wolf snapped and snarled in his direction, but the bear roared again, and the wolf took off into the trees, tail between his legs. The old bear fell back down onto all fours and stared up at the princess. She regarded him fearfully. "You can come down," he said. "How do I know you didn't just save me so you could eat me yourself?" asked the princess. "I suppose this is a fair question," admitted the bear. "But I promise I won't eat you." The princess had no reason to trust the old bear, except that he had kind eyes, and so she slowly made her way down the tree. When she reached the ground, the bear only watched her, and so she supposed she was not going to be eaten today. "Thank you," she told the old bear. "Of course," he said. "Can I walk with you back to your home?" "Of course," said the princess. And so the princess and the old bear walked together through the forest, back to the big wooden house. After that day, the princess would occasionally find gifts from the bear: a fresh-caught salmon, a handful of ripe berries, a newly blossomed bluebell. One spring, when a sudden thaw flooded the path out of the princess's home, the old bear was there, and she rode his back across the river. The old bear began to think that the princess should be his mate. After all, she had no mate, and she needed one, and he could keep her warm and provide her a much more suitable den and catch fish for her and protect her from wolves. She, in turn, would brush out his fur and pick berries without smushing half of them, and scratch that one part of his back he couldn't reach. And with how she took care of the goblins, she would be an excellent mother for his cubs. One day, the old bear came with a ring of spruce and asked the princess to be his bride. "I'm sorry," said the princess. "You are a very good friend, and I appreciate all you've done for me, but I cannot marry you. You're a bear. I'm a princess. It would never work." The old bear was crushed. "Can we still be friends?" he asked. "We will always be friends," said the princess, "but I will never marry you." The old bear and the princess carried on their friendship, and after 1 year he tried again to ask her to be his bride, but once again she refused him. This happened 1 year later, and 1 year after that, and then finally the princess said, "Old bear, you are my dear friend, and I appreciate all you have done for me, but I would sooner you have left me to the wolves than marry you, and that is how it will always be. I have my hands full with the 2 goblins who live under my house, and they are all I need." That wounded the old bear deeply, but it was finally enough to stop his proposals. They remained friends, and he continued to give her gifts of fresh salmon and ripe berries and newly bloomed bluebells, but the old bear never again asked the princess to be his bride, much as he might have wanted to. And that is how the princess befriended the old bear, and how she refused him. The Beaver Fixes the House. Once upon a time, in an ancient and deep forest, there lived a wise princess in a big wooden house. One night, a particularly violent storm shook the house. It shook the shingles on the roof, and the planks in the walls. It even shook the beams on which the house stood, blowing the whole thing near to the ground. The princess hid in a closet, fearing the house would come down on her as she slept. In the morning, the house was still standing, but it was badly damaged. The storm had blown shingles off the roof and planks off the walls and even bent a post upon which the house stood. The first two things she could fix, but the last concerned her. "What will I do?" despaired the wise princess, for though she knew many things, she did not know how to fix the big wooden house. Just then, the old bear came by to see if the princess had any trouble in the storm. When he found her nailing planks back into place, he said, "Oh, stop, princess, let me do that for you." "I'm happy to do it," said the princess, "but if you want to help with the roof, you may." When the pair were done with the roof and the walls, they examined the bent support post. "I could throw my body against it," said the old bear. "I am very large." He stretched up onto his hind legs, being sure the princess could appreciate how very large he was, then charged straight at the post. He threw his body against it with an impressive thud. The impact moved the post, but too far, and it ended up bent in the other direction. The wise princess decided more precision was needed. She thought then of the very old beaver who kept an excellently crafted dam. Perhaps she can help. She went looking for the very old beaver and found the industrious animal hard at work, slapping down mud on a part of her dam that had been blown apart in the storm. Most of the structure was unharmed because the beaver was very good at building things. The princess knew she had come to the right place. "Beaver," she said, "my house was damaged in the storm. Would you help me fix it?" "I believe I could do that, yes," said the very old beaver, and she paused at fixing her own den to follow the princess. The very old beaver examined the big wooden house and nodded. "It will be an easy fix," she said, and she set about righting the post, with loud slaps of her tail. When she was done, the wise princess stroked the beaver's head. "Thank you, beaver," she said. "The wind blew the shingles off the roof and the planks off the walls and even bent this post. Now, thanks to you, I still have a home." "Think nothing of it," said the very old beaver, who returned to work on her own den once more. That winter, the very old beaver grew ill, very ill. She was not able to fix her den nor to gather food. When the princess found out, she set about delivering meals to the beaver. She bought stews of corn and beans and baskets full of bark and twigs from the beaver's favourite aspen. One day, the wise princess noticed that the beaver's den had begun to fall apart. She set about fixing it, and though she was not as talented as the very old beaver, the fix kept the creature warm and dry. "Thank you," said the very old beaver. "Of course," said the princess. "You helped me when the storm blew my house near to the ground. Thanks to you, I still have a home, and I am happy to do the same." The princess continued to nurse the old beaver until the day she came to the dam, and the forest was still. No birds sang, no branches rustled, no small things skittered within the underbrush. "Oh," said the princess, staring sadly at the dam, for she knew the old beaver had passed on. "Goodbye, my friend." And that is how the very old beaver saved the big wooden house, and how the wise princess repaid her kindness. The Princess's Party. Once upon a time, in a deep and ancient forest, the princess was melancholy because it was the 1-year anniversary of when she had run away from home. Sensing her sadness, her forest friends showed up at her door. They were headed by the pelican, pious and attentive, and organised by the moose, stalwart and far-sighted. The old bear was there, with his claws so sharp, as well as the big frog prattling away. Even the haughty muskrat, who mostly came out at night, had come. The bear invited her to ride on his back, promising no wolf would harry her path, and then the animals led her to a fairy glen where a fabulous party had been prepared. There was a buffet of seafood the pelican had served from her never-emptying beak. The air was filled with winking fairy lights the moose had arranged after clouds filled the sky, and the gregarious frog mixed up fizzing drinks. Only the muskrat had done nothing in particular, mooching off everyone else's hard work. The princess had a very good time at her party, such a good time that she forgot to say thank you to any of her friends. Noticing this, the fairies devised a bit of mischief. When the princess went to open her gifts, she found 3 identical boxes at the edge of the glen. Puzzled, she turned back and gasped. The entire party had vanished. "Because you have taken your friends for granted," called the naughty fairies, "we have hidden them from you. But we like games. Guess who has given you each of these presents, and you'll get your friends back." The princess opened the first box. Inside, there was a torch, which, when lit, revealed the truth. Said the princess. "Someone wants to make sure I don't get lost in the woods when it's dark, and that I always see right from wrong. Which of my friends would give me a gift like that?" She opened the second box. Inside there was a magic sword, which would leap right out of the bearer's hands to defend them. Said the princess. "Someone wants to make sure I am protected if I'm ever under threat. Which of my friends would give me a gift like that?" She opened the third box. Inside there was a bag of coins that always provided money if it was for something the bearer truly needed. Said the princess. "Someone wants to make sure I have money to buy food when I am hungry and clothes when I am cold. Which of my friends would give me a gift like that?" The princess thought about her friends, and then she smiled certainly. "Fairies," she said, "I may have been thoughtless, but I appreciate all that my friends have given to me and all that they have done for me." She gave her answers, and the vexed fairies were forced to restore the party in a flash of colourful light. One by one, she gave the animals a hug and thanked them for their presence, the party, and all they had done to help since she'd moved into the forest. And that is how the princess celebrated her first anniversary in the woods. The Goblins and the Ice Cave. Once upon a time, in a deep and ancient forest, the crafty goblins were playing near the glacier when they discovered a hole in the ice. They crept gradually through a widening passage and found themselves in a spacious ice cave. Light spilled down the undulating blue-white walls in a way that made them look like electric waterfalls, and a column made up of hundreds of icicles stood in the centre. This was a time before the goblins had settled beneath the old wooden house, and they had nowhere to live. "Perhaps we could live here," they said excitedly. Moments later, the sound of stomping feet interrupted their play, and they realised that perhaps someone already lived there. They hid behind a boulder to wait to see who was coming. The old bear sauntered into the cave, shaking powdery snow from his coat. He let out a giant yawn and lay down in the corner of a pile of tree boughs, snoring within seconds. When they were sure he was deep asleep, the goblins conspired to claim the cave for themselves. They chipped away at the glacier until they had filled a basket full of ice, then hid once more behind their boulder and started tossing chunks of it on the sleeping bear. Now, Old Bear was not the smartest creature in the forest, so when he woke up covered in ice, he roared, "My cave is collapsing!" Then he lumbered to his feet and ran outside before the whole thing could come down on top of him. The goblins crept out after him and did a loop before coming back to find him sitting outside. "What happened?" they asked. "My cave is collapsing," bemoaned the old bear, "and it's time for me to hibernate. Where will I stay for the winter?" It had not occurred to the goblins that the old bear had settled in for the winter, and they felt a little bad. But they did not want the old bear to know what they had done, so instead they offered to help him find a new den. Together they searched. They inspected cavernous stone and hollow trees and deeply pocketed knolls. Nothing they found was as beautiful as the ice cave, but the old bear settled on a packed earthen hollow that would keep him warm and dry for his long sleep. "Good night," he yawned, and the goblins gleefully returned to their new home. In the spring, the old bear woke and went for a nice long walk to stretch his legs. His path took him right up to his old cave, where he heard the curious sound of laughter. Making his way inside, he was surprised to find that his cave was intact, and the goblins were inside playing a game. "What is this?" growled the old bear. The goblins stopped playing and looked ashamed. "We're sorry, old bear," said the goblins, "but we had nowhere to live, and it's just so beautiful. We didn't realize you were about to hibernate, and then we couldn't bear to tell you what we'd done." The old bear was angry at the trick, but the young goblins looked appropriately ashamed, and so he said, "Come with me." He led the crafty goblins to the hollow in which he had hibernated for the winter. "You two can have this spot," he said. "And look." Someone had built a big wooden house right over the top of it. "No one lives there now," said the old bear, "but one day maybe someone will." The earthen hollow was not as beautiful as the ice cave, but it kept the goblins warm and dry, and they were excited that someday they might have someone living overhead. Someone who baked cakes and tolerated their mischief. And that is the story of how the crafty goblins tried to steal the cave of the old bear, and how they got their own instead.